What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? Apparently, our little program was a little slow on the starting of the recording, but we're all good now. Summer break had to end at some point for our show, and it now has. COVID couldn't keep us down forever. You have found the Outlap F1 podcast. This is season 6, episode 31. It's the 2024 Dutch GP, and I am happy to report that we are pretty much all the way back to full strength. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. Cody, how has your recovery gone from the dreaded vid?
It is better now. I feel much better. It was really crappy there for a few days, but definitely well on the road to recovery. And now I'm very happy. Got my Formula One fix. I'm surrounded by cats. Life's good.
All right, that's great to hear. Amazingly, somehow I evaded the COVID this week, apparently, but it's coming for me. I know that there's a new round of vaccines that just got approved, and I'm going to be making an appointment as soon as I can. Yowza, because it's not just you, dude. It's a lot of people I know have had it, and the reports are popping back up. So, do the responsible thing. They've got the new vaxes that are coming out that have all the new variants. So I would highly recommend that you go do that if you are so inclined. But that's not why you're here. You're not here to get a COVID PSA. You're here to talk Formula One, which is back up and running. And boy, did we have a lot of things to discuss. I think I've got a news segment that could probably be a half an hour just on its own. But we'll do our best to try to get through it all. But if you found our show, welcome along. You can find us, as always, on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, YouTube at Outlap F1. I'm rusty. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle. You can see our link tree in our show notes. And if you're on YouTube and you still enjoy what you're hearing and like what you're seeing, you can click the like button or you can smash that subscribe button. And if you're on your favorite podcasting app, you can leave us a 5-star review. All that does is help us come up a little bit better in search results and help us get our content to you that much quicker. Email. You can always email the show, chatnow@outlapf1.com. Thank you so much to the people who continue to support the show monetarily, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of that hashtag Outlap F1 Nation, you can see our anchor page in those show notes. $1 or $5, whatever you'd like to give, all goes into purchasing new equipment or upgrading equipment we already have to make the show better and improve the overall experience for you, the listener, which is why we do this. Just as a final reminder, the good folks at Manscaped, you can use our code OUTLAP, that's OUTLAP, get 20% off and free shipping with our code at checkout. All right, so I'm going to compress a month's worth of news into about 4 lines. So here we go. Number 1, Oliver Oakes has debuted and was named and is now running the Alpine team as their team principal. Number 2, Jack Doohan gets the other Alpine drive for 2025, so take another seat off the board. The glasses and the funky hair are back in F1. Mattia Binotto will be back on the grid, taking over as the CEO at Audi with the ability to make lots of all of the important decisions. And he's already made one. He has pipped Jonathan Wheatley away from Red Bull, so he will be joining the Audi outfit as its team principal. Andrea Stella gets a new deal at McLaren, and they extend his contract out. I think that's a pretty good idea, because especially considering what happened this weekend. And wow, that was just the last few weeks. Really quickly caught up. But Cody, big thoughts on any of that before we get into the weekend?
Yeah, it's been a pretty good whirlwind of news over the summer break. And as you probably found out, didn't get to talk about it on a preview because there wasn't a preview because I was hocking up a lung. So I didn't do that. But yeah, we got to see Oliver Oakes, in his first race as team principal this weekend, and ended up working out all right for him. Got some points on the board in his debut, so I guess that is a good thing for him. The Jack Doohan to Alpine, I'm pretty excited about. It's nice that we've got more new blood coming into Formula One, and Jack Doohan is a member of the Alpine Academy, so it is really good that they are putting faith in their drivers that they've been bringing through. the pipeline, and now they're bringing him up into Formula One to see what he can do. And I do think it's going to be a really good setup because he's coming in. He's going to be up against Pierre Gasly at Alpine, who is we've heard is the other seat going forward. Pierre Gasly has a lot of experience in the sport, but he is still very young and hungry. So I think it'll be a really good measurement to see how well Doohan is in Formula One. And then, I think Mattia Binotto is actually kind of fun as a character, so it's kind of fun to see him being back in the sport in some capacity. I do think the Jonathan Wheatley thing is going to be kind of a big deal because if I remember correctly, he's been a long time member at Red Bull, pretty much like since they became Red Bull as a Formula One team. And yeah, for him to be leaving, I guess, is a pretty big deal, although not completely unsurprising. It's not that surprising because I guess they've been saying that he was interested in continuing to move up the ladder, and that if that opportunity wasn't going to present itself at Red Bull, that he would seek that elsewhere, which it looks like that has now happened. So hopefully he does very well in his new position at Audi. And yeah, the Andrea Stale thing, not surprising at all. McLaren is continuing to succeed and thrive under him. I think they were kind of going in that direction already, but they're continuing to do so under him. So not surprised at all that he has gotten that contract extension.
Yeah, one of the cornerstones that we've seen under the Zach Brown tenure over there is once he decides he likes you, he wants to lock you up for the long term. So that seems to be the modus operandi there. Interesting thing about Mattia Binotto coming back. He does bring a lot of interesting engineering experience, and that's a team that's going to need a lot of engineering know-how and setup and all that. And they're already kind of behind the eight ball from everything that I've read. So he's got his work cut out for him, but it's a good acquisition to get a guy from Red Bull who was right in that position of building a team with Jonathan Wheatley. So that's a heck of a get. So I'm happy about that for that team. So that gives them some hope and some good news, which is something they've really lacked all year. As far as Oliver Oakes goes, I know he's a longtime Formula 2 team principal, so he's been at least familiar with running a team. One race, you really can't tell, whether or not how his style is really going to be yet. But I think he's kind of in that evaluation phase. He used the rest of this year to kind of figure out what you got. And then I would expect changes. I would expect movement on the Alpine front as he tries to put his stamp into what he wants that team to be. Probably one of the first changes you're going to see, promoting from within, Jack Doohan, very deserving to come up from F2. He's been one of the better F2 drivers for the past few years. So I'm happy that one of the academies will actually produce an F1 driver. That's always a good thing for all of that. So interesting to see how he will come in and how he will integrate with that team. And like I said, I wish him nothing but the best, but we've got the Aussies and the New Zealanders have invaded Formula One. There's quite a bit of that going on next year for sure. All right, so we will start with our headlines of the weekend as we can actually focus on the Dutch Grand Prix. Oh yeah, there was a race that actually happened with cars going around, and it was fun. Cody, I'll let you go first, and then I will have what I would say my special guest chime in with mine.
All right. My headline of the day is 20 seconds in front, but it's not Max. We saw probably the most dominant performance from McLaren that we've seen in a long time. Lando Norris, despite not making it to the front off the line, ended up pulling in front and running away with the victory today, finishing 20 seconds up the road from Max Verstappen in a very dominant display. He looked like he's won a million times before, and he puts win number 2 on the board. And I think this really shows that McLaren has got the goods for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I obviously completely agree with all of that, but I think I'm going to let my special guest tell you exactly what I thought of Lando's weekend. Thank you, Sith Lord Darth Vader, for joining the show there. And yes, impressive is exactly what I would say. This is one of the reasons why I've always been a fan of his, because I always thought weekends like this were in there, and it was just kind of great to see it come out. Not the perfect symphony. We'll have to talk about the start thing again, but didn't let it go to his head. Went back in, did the work, really never was more than a second and a half behind Max. And then once the Red Bull's tires went off, he got around Max and he was gone. It was never a question of whether or not somebody was going to catch him. The only thing I thought was, oh my God, please let the car stay together until the end of the damn race. But that's probably the most boring Lando Norris win I've probably ever seen throughout his entire career, because he usually makes it a lot more drama filled. But hell yeah. I mean, championship might not be all the way back on, but it's turning back up again, and the constructors is definitely on, because that's getting closer and closer and closer. So the excitement factor will continue to build for sure. All right, so we will go back and we will start with our qualifying recap, which saw, let's see if we can actually do this right. Let's see if I remember where all the buttons are. Ha 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 ha, there we go. All right, getting the dreaded DQ, and we will talk about why that was the Williams of Alex Albon. So not setting any times because they were all taken away. The other Williams didn't even start the qualifying. We'll have to talk about that. That was Logan Sargent, and he might not have been qualified either had he actually participated. So perhaps that's the better way to have that happen, maybe. So P18 was Joe Granu. P17 was Valtteri Bottas. The two Kick Saubers at the back of the field again. P16 was Esteban Ocon. P15 was Daniel Ricciardo. P14, Kevin Magnussen. P13, Nico Hulkenberg. P12, Yuki Tsunoda. P11 on the road. Did not expect to see this. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. It looked like he was on for a top three until qualifying, and then something weird happened. P10, Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. P9 was Pierre Gasly. P8 was Lance Stroll. P7, Fernando Alonso. P6, Charles Leclerc. P5 was Sergio Perez. P4 was George Russell in the other Mercedes, so there you go. P3 was Oscar Piastri. P2 was Max Verstappen. And in P1, with a lap time of 109.673, that was Lando Norris in the McLaren. All right. Cody, big thoughts on the qualifying.
I think the first thing we got to talk about is that Williams had a really rough time from qualifying this weekend. So the Alex Albon disqualification. Now, I'm not super up on all the literature on this, so you might have to correct me if I'm wrong. But if I am correct, I was seeing that they disqualified him because Williams had a newly designed floor for this race, and they ended up finding that the floor was a little too wide. Is that correct?
3 millimeters too wide. And according to Williams, it passed their scale, but it didn't pass the FIA's scale.
Yeah. You're cutting really razor thin margins in Formula One all the time. So to hear that it's only a few millimeters is on point and also kind of funny. But it's maybe a little embarrassing that they had this new floor and it ended up not being up to appropriate spec. That's why Albon got disqualified. But at least he, you were talking about that maybe it was better that Logan Sargent didn't have to go through the whole process of being disqualified. But I think in his mind, he would have at least liked to have had the shot. But Logan Sargent didn't even participate in qualifying because his car needed to be pretty much rebuilt after a pretty nasty looking accident in I believe it was free practice 3, right? Where he went off and did pretty significant damage to the car. So he didn't even get to take part. So one Williams starting at the back and the other one starting from the pit lane. Not a real good look for them for the first race after the summer break.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of set the stage, the weather, which, as last year we learned kind of can come in off that sea and just kind of pop up rain showers really, really quickly. Well, that was definitely in play all day Friday, FP1 was pretty much a washout, but then dried very quickly. There was some running at the end of the session. FP2 was dry, so we got on our normal long run tire runs in that we were expecting. FP3 started out wet again and then stayed wet for just pretty much almost the entirety of the session. But then when we got to qualifying, it ended up being dry again. So, you had all this changeable weather conditions. Logan Sargent is out there on a set of intermediate tires. It's still fairly wet at this point, and he looks like one of the tires going out of turn 3 ended up getting on the grass, spun the car. He's a passenger at that point, and the car hit the barrier, and it got all of the barrier, and the car disintegrates into 10 million pieces, and then caught on fire. And meanwhile, Logan's in the car, huffing and like, oh man, I just wrecked another car. And they're having to tell him, dude, the car's on fire. Get the hell out the car. More than one, like George Russell came by and said, look, the car's on fire. You got to get a marshal here. So he got out. The car was looked like it was going to be a complete total redo with a new chassis and everything. How Williams managed to save that chassis and get it to actually pass tech and everything is a bit of a minor miracle. It just in and of itself. But then we find out after Alex Albon, who had qualified P8, so that's Williams making Q3 on pure pace, on merit, no help, from anybody else there. Albon loses that time because the floor turns out to be 3 millimeters over the line. And then Williams says, well, we have to go and take another look at the thing we used to measure because it obviously wasn't calibrated right or we didn't do it right. So, according to James Vowles, what they ended up doing was they literally took a bit of sandpaper and shaved the 3 millimeters off of the floor. They remeasured it, and then both Albon and Sargent were allowed to continue. However, now, after destroying yet another car, after destroying a car with probably the most significant set of upgrades that Williams has brought all season, Logan Sargent now finds himself very much in the crosshairs, and there are rumors circulating all about as to whether or not we will see him through the end of the season. No official announcement has been made as of now, but with Monza right around the corner, and as I was saying in the pre-show, a full F2 and full F3 grid going to be in Monza. If they want to make a move, everybody who could potentially replace him will be there and available. And we've seen weird stuff happen in Monza before, so we will monitor that, and we will let you know if anything comes out of that. Further up the grid, I thought the other big surprise, the one that shocked me, Lewis Hamilton going out in Q2. The Mercedes had looked really good throughout all of the running on Friday in both the wet and the dry sessions. George Russell put, a pretty good lap time together and finished, fairly up the grid. But, in qualifying anyway, and then Lewis Hamilton going out in Q2 in P12, it was then further... he had even worse thing happen to him because he got a 3-place grid penalty for supposedly impeding Sergio Perez, which is something we can definitely talk about, because if that's impeding, where do you want him to go? Would you prefer him to teleport himself to Mars to get out of Perez's way there? That was just not a good call as far as I'm concerned. It was kind of crazy that they actually gave him a penalty for that. But so he moves from P11 down now to P4. It was originally P12 to P15. Then they disqualified Albon, so he comes back up to P14 where he lined up on the grid. So we had that. The top 5, interesting that Sergio Perez actually seemed to hold his weight in qualifying here, which was good to see. Max Verstappen doing Max Verstappen things, driving that Red Bull and keeping it close. At one point did manage to take the pole away from Lando. Lando on his last lap improved. Actually 3/10, which is one of the bigger deltas we've seen in a long time. Manages to take it away at the end. A fairly fun qualifying, especially with all the mixed changeable conditions happening.
Yeah, it was good qualifying. It was cool to see Lando so far out in front at the end with the final times. I was kind of wondering how things would shake out with, anybody bringing upgrades or changes to the car after the summer break. I was wondering if maybe we would go back to Red Bull dominance. But we haven't, and we saw that right from the qualifying, and it was good to see.
Yeah, and McLaren had brought a big, not as significant, well, they call it a significant amount of updates, not as big as the Miami updates, but it seems that every time they put new bits on that car, the car seems to respond and the driver seems to respond with them. And that's kind of what you saw here. So that certainly set the stage with the two air quote championship protagonists on the front row. And we will now flip over to the Sunday running, and we shall start with those back markers, which saw the two kick Saubers of Zhao Guan Yu and Valtteri Bottas, respectively, be finished 2 laps down. Ick. P18 was Kevin Magnussen, and we will talk about the fun and adventurous weekend that the Haas team has had all weekend concerning international banking and how much fun that is. And you thought you were going to talk about F1 this weekend. We're going to talk about international banking, dang it. All right, here we go. P17 was Yuki Tsunoda. P16 was Logan Sargent, who did get permission to start the race and did finish the race, only 1 lap down. P15 was Esteban Ocon. P14 was Alex Albon. And P13 was Lance Stroll. All right, Cody, any big thoughts in the backmarkers here, or is this kind of the usual suspects as we've now come to know them?
It is pretty much the usual suspects. We did see both William drivers move up a little bit from all the way in the back, and we did see the Kick-Sauber team go pretty much as far backward as they can. Like you said, they're the only 2 drivers that finished 2 laps down, so Kick-Sauber continuing to struggle very much. Kevin Magnussen, it seemed like they were putting him on a strategy where they were, praying for a safety car or some kind of intervention to occur in the race, because they left him out for a long time on tires, and it just never happened. So he ends up falling pretty far back. And then let's see here, we got Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon both finishing outside of the points while their teammates got better performances in. So not the best weekend for them in particular, but at least we know that their cars are capable of getting points based on the performances of Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, so all right, moving into the midfield. So P12 saw Daniel Ricciardo, P11 was Nico Hulkenberg, and the other Haas just missing out on the points. P10 was Fernando Alonso, P9 was Pierre Gasly. So Ali Oaks gets points on his team principal debut with via Pierre Gasly with 2 points there. P8 was Lewis Hamilton rallying from the P14 grid position start. P7 was George Russell. This was probably the biggest negative surprise as he slips back into P7. We will talk about the strategy call that Mercedes did that did not pan out. P6 was Sergio Perez. P5 was Carlos Sainz. And P4, a bit of a hard luck race for him. He also wasn't very impressed with his own driving. That was the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri. All right, big thoughts here in the midfield.
Got a bunch. It is really good to see Pierre Gasly. He finished where he qualified. It was a pretty good qualifying to begin with, getting up into P9, and he was putting in some pretty feisty racing throughout. He had a good fight with Carlos Sainz at one point, trying to hold him off for as long as he could. So some good on-track action there. Good to see him get some points. As far as the Mercedes goes, it is a little weird to see them be both at the back of these, the big 4 front-running teams right now, especially after their recent very strong performances before the summer break. So a little disappointing to see them end up there, although you kind of have to look at where they came from. Lewis Hamilton did have to fight up the grid quite a bit because of that poor qualifying and grid penalty. So he actually made up some good ground to get up into 8th place, whereas George Russell kind of did the opposite. He started further up and then went backwards, and they kind of met in the middle at that P7, P8 spot where we have kind of recognized as being the end of the front runners.
Yeah. I mean, Hamilton, I thought, had a great first stint. Starting on a soft tire. He made that thing last a lot longer than I think even Pirelli were going to assume that it was going to last. And that got him the track position. So when they came in and made the stop, he was able to go back onto a hard tire, he actually pulled off the successful two-stopper of anybody who tried it, I would say, really, in that he went onto the hard tire and then finished on the soft tire, closing in on his teammate. Conversely, his teammate, who had started in a decent spot and was looking okay. I mean, I thought his first stint pace was pretty decent. Did do the medium to a soft or medium to a hard tire switch, but then decided that they were going to box him for a second time to put him on a set of soft tires. And he ended up with such a terrible delta at the end of that pit stop. One, it was a slow stop. And two, I think he ended up coming out like 20 seconds behind Perez with about, 25 laps to go. Just almost an impossible delta to make up. He gets within 5 seconds of Perez at the end, but it wasn't enough. And basically cost himself 2 spots. I think he could have finished P5 had he just, stuck with the alpha strategy. So, yeah, a bit of a confusing call. If I'm being honest, I didn't quite understand what they were trying to do there. But, that's kind of how that cookie crumbled. P6, Sergio Perez gets a B minus.
Yeah, you got to give a little credit where it's due. I guess he had a fairly quiet race. He finished way off of Max, is kind of we've come to expect. But he did finish better than he has in a lot of races.
That's true.
I suppose he's doing his part to try to help defend that Constructors' Championship. Wish he was doing a little bit more. But yeah, pretty quiet race for him, and I guess you can't fault. He didn't crash. He didn't finish at the end of those 4 front runners. He at least outdid the Mercedes. So I guess kind of a middle of the road weekend.
Like I said, it's like a C plus B minus grade. You passed, but you didn't do really great. Carlos Sainz, Ferrari had actually kind of a down and then up weekend after not looking very strong in practice or qualifying. Both the Ferraris, I think, had some actually really good race pace all day today. Carlos Sainz up to P5, and the other Ferrari that we're going to talk about, I'll just tell you what the podium is. The podium was P3 Charles Leclerc, P2 Max Verstappen, and P1 Lando Norris. The other impressive drive, Charles Leclerc, starting from P6 on a track that is difficult to overtake, used the undercut probably better than anybody else and made it stick against a McLaren that seemed on paper to be a heck of a lot faster. I thought the way that Leclerc defended for a good chunk of that second stint was most impressive. The way that he was deploying on the straight was just frustrating enough to counteract the DRS, just enough to keep him ahead. So it was very interesting to watch the Piastri-Leclerc battle throughout the course of this race. And fair props to Charles Leclerc, man. He drove his tail off today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a pretty good fight there between Leclerc and Piastri. I really thought once Piastri got into the DRS zone that he was going to blow by Leclerc and we were going to have 2 McLarens on the podium. But it was not to be. Like I said, Leclerc really drove his pants off. Put that Ferrari on the podium where none of us thought it was going to be this weekend. So very good showing from him. But I think the big talking point after this race is just how big the gap was between our top 2 here, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. Normally, we're talking about Max Verstappen being the one that's 20 plus seconds up the road. However, I think Lando Norris has something to say about it this time because he is taking the W this time. He did not have a great start. Again, that does need to be said, and it does seem like the race start is something that Lando is continuing to struggle with, or maybe there's just issues with the car that are causing it to not be real great on the start. But he did lose P1 to Max at the start. Max held that for several laps and pulled up a little bit of a gap. And I thought that maybe we were going to see, Max coming back from some break and establishing his dominant form again. But I think he had a little mistake at one point, and like you said earlier on, the tires fell off, and Max was complaining of having no grip in the car. And at that point, Lando caught back up, flew past him. And that was pretty much it. He kept just opening up the gap. more and more through both stints. And yeah, by the end, way out in front. You can't argue in this one, like you could in Miami, that he had luck go his way. This was entirely on his pace, his form, very strong performance. And yeah, I think he put any doubters silenced after this race.
Well, or temporarily shut up. Let's put it that way. I don't know that the doubters are ever going to go away, but
yeah, they're going to be back in Monza. Don't worry.
Yeah, I know. I'll take the temporary reprieve, at least as a Lando fan. But yeah, I mean, what I saw in the start was, I've seen actually a really good. There's a SkyPad recap of the start, and they literally take him through like the entirety of like he's supposed to be doing this, and then we expect the car to do that, and he nails the launch. The launch is actually equal. The problem was the second phase, or the first gear shift, or what they ended up calling like the half gear shift. Either the car wasn't calibrated right, or the wheel just slipped, or the grip wasn't there, or something happened, and he ended up losing somewhere around of like 4/10 by the end of the second phase of the start, which in a start is a lot. So I guess he was lucky that he only lost one position. But the other weird statistical thing that I would tell you about the start, with almost everybody in the odd positions, which was the left side, the outside of the grid, P1 lost a position, P3 lost a position, and P5 lost a position, all off the line on the first lap. So I don't know that it was just Lando's car, but it was something happened. And I don't think there was anything wrong or weird about it. I just think it was just the inside is definitely where you want to be on the launch at Zandvoort. I think that was just kind of what we saw. And yeah, Lando's car slipped a little bit and Max got him. Lando didn't let it get to him, which was probably the best thing. Like, he didn't hear any complaining over the radio or anything like that. Max opens up to about maybe 1.8, 1.9 second lead. And then all of a sudden the tires just dropped. And that was the thing that I think surprised me more than anything, was once it went off big time for Max. And I think it was even the lap before Lando takes the lead. All of a sudden I'm looking on the timing screens and I see he's like 0.1 behind him. And I go, whoa, like he had just gotten back into DRS. And I'm like, whoa, that was quick. He didn't get the move completed, but I'm like, oh, he was right there. And I'm going, okay, let's see if we can get him on the next lap. And then you just see the timing, and he had clearly gotten past him on the straight, made the move stick. There was no bad move from Max Verstappen, who I think was kind of resigned at that point to what was going to happen, at least from what he was dealing with in the car. Had a lot of radio messages from him. He was not a happy camper in the car at all today. And then once Lando got past, gone. McLaren car in clean air equals goodbye, at least today. And Lando just puts in all the laps near the end, manages to get the fastest lap, which was something you did not expect, because he was on, I think, 35, 40 lap old hard tires, and Lewis Hamilton had set the fastest lap on a new set of soft tires. And Lewis actually had radioed his pit wall saying, "Am I good on the fastest lap?" And they all assumed that he was. And then Lando went out and did that last lap just to show you that, how much pace was really in that car. So that's probably the most hooked up I've ever seen him in a car, where the machinery was great. He was great. This is the potential. This is what's always been there. Here it is. Here's why I'm a fan for that. So yeah, it was a fun race for me.
It was. If you're a McLaren fan, it is definitely a good feeling. I do have to say, was hoping for a little bit more of a banger coming back from the summer break. It wasn't, there's no crashes, there's no crazy antics at the front, like you said. Once Lando got by Max just kind of let it happen. I think it was too early in the race for him to put up a huge fight, because if he was going to get by him then, he's going to get by him later. So yeah, not the most exciting race we've ever seen. But if you're a McLaren fan like Andy, was fantastic.
And it does bring both championships that much a little bit closer in both fronts, as we will talk about when we come back from the break, which we are going to take right now. So come on back. We'll get into how the points shaved out after this round. We'll open it up to your segment, the fan email segment. We'll get your takes on what you guys saw over the course of the weekend as well. We'll hand out some awards. We won't do predictions because they kind of got canceled because of the dreaded COVID, but that's okay. But then we will preview the Temple of Speed is coming. Monza awaits next weekend. And we'll have to talk about what's going on at Haas. I have a special award for it, but I will also, try to give you the story as I see it and why they're still in Zandvoort right now. So come on back. We will get into all of that in just a little bit. Welcome back in. This is season 6, episode number 31 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Dutch GP review show, and you've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And one thing I hadn't even gotten a chance to mention yet, we actually had an international correspondent at this race. Our friend Deanna, who has since moved over to the UK, was sending me pictures from the race today. She was able to do a day trip, as she's called it, to just jump on a train and go to Zandvoort and go to check in the race. So we were both very jealous, but it looks like Dee is having a very good time getting settled in over there. So we wish her all the best and was happy to see that she was having a good time in Zandvoort today. So what we're going to do now is we're going to recap the driver and the team standings. So, Cody, if you want to take the driver standings, I will chime in with the team standings.
All right. So out in front, P1, still Max Verstappen for Red Bull at 295 points. However, the gap does close a little bit to P2 with Lando Norris getting the win this weekend. So Lando, P2, with McLaren at 225 points. So it's a 70-point gap, and everything I've been seeing has been trying to break down the numbers in a way it's going to show Lando Norris catching up to Max before the end of the season. How if Lando wins every race for the rest of the season and Max Verstappen finishes P2 for the rest of the season and gets some of the fastest laps that he could overtake Max, I think he's going to need a little bit more than that because I think even with this recent success, winning every race might be just a little bit of a stretch. But who knows? We'll have to see. Could be the greatest comeback we've ever seen. And I would be there for it. Anyway, P3, Charles Leclerc for Ferrari at 192 points. And then P4, Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren at 179 points. P5, Carlos Sainz, Ferrari at 172, so just a little bit behind Piastri. P6 is Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes at 154 points. P7, Sergio Perez, decent weekend this time out, I guess it has to be said, in the other Red Bull at 139 points. P8, George Russell with Mercedes at 122, and then that big gap back to P9, Fernando Alonso, and the first Aston Martin at 50 points, and P10, Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin at 24 points.
Yeah, as much as I want to try to say championship back on, there's still a lot of math that has to happen. And
it is mathematically possible.
I know.
There's a million different ways you could get there. I don't know if we will, but you could.
I'm still in the camp of he still needs help. And if this actually does get under 50 points, then I will start to get excited. I'll even get really more excited if it gets within the Grand Prix distance, which would be 26 points. So until we kind of get there, there's a lot of success Lando has to have, and there's a lot of faltering that Max has to have. And I can't say that Max isn't going to fight back at some point before the end of the season. I think he's too good of a driver not to.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, over the last few seasons, we haven't really seen Max falter much at all. So, yeah, it would take some help, I think. But yeah, you never know. Crazier stuff has happened.
That's true. I mean, I'm pulling for it. God knows I'm pulling for it. But let's let's calm down here. It's still a long distance before we really, I will tell you when it's permission to go crazy time, because I'll go crazy with you at that point. But anyway, the championship that is on and in full swing is the Constructors. And Red Bull have been in P1 in the Constructors, I heard on the broadcast, since Spain of 2022. That streak does continue, but it's getting closer and closer and closer now. So they are still in P1 with 434 points. P2 getting ever closer is that McLaren team. They check in now with 404 points. That's a delta of 30 points. So it is within a race potential haul of points there. P3 is Ferrari. They check in with 370 points. P4 is Mercedes with 276 points. P5, there's the chasm. Aston Martin, Mercedes, they come in with 74 points. And another chasm. P6 to Red Bull, the V-Carb team, they come in with 34 points. P7 is Haas. They check in with 27. P8 is Alpine. They are up to 13 points. P9 is Williams, who remain on 4 points. And P10 doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon either. Yikes. Oh, my goodness, what is going on there? Kick Sauber Ferrari with 0 points on the season. Wow. All right, so we will move into, we've heard our takes on the Dutch GP. We'll now open it up to the fan email segment. Just a couple of contributors, probably because this is our first race back and nobody knew if we were actually going to be able to get the broadcast up and running. I'm glad to say that we are. But there are 2 regulars here. Cody, I'll let you take them. What do we have in the fan emails?
All right. Our first email comes from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, "Hello, team. It's good to be back after the summer break. McLaren, wow. What were your thoughts on the McLaren strategy? Is this the path to successful times? Could McLaren be F1 champions if they played this right? I thought Gasly had a good race starting from P9 to finish P9, and Perez has finally pulled himself together, I think. I think it might be a little early into the post-summer break here to say that Perez has pulled himself together. He did have a decent showing, but it would be cool if he was a little closer to Max. But we do now see that the struggles with that car are very much real. Even Max is not able to drag it to a win for several races now. I think they said that this is the biggest streak of races without wins that Max has had since 2020.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
It's been since Spain. Spain was the last win.
So these struggles that they're having are real, but even so, there's still a pretty big gap there between Perez and Max. So I think for him, I would say him finishing if Max finishes P2 and Perez finishes like P4, I would say he's pulled it together. But there's still a lot of season left for that to happen. I still hope that he has a really good showing at the Mexican Grand Prix, because it's always good to see people succeed at their home Grand Prix. As far as McLaren being F1 champions, the team, kind of like we were just talking about, the team, yes, sure. They could definitely do that if they play their cards right. They have been closing the gap for a while now. Drivers' Championship is a little bit of a taller ask, but it's mathematically possible. And if not this year, we still got these regulations for one more season, and it could be anybody, with the best car next year. It's the competition is definitely closed up significantly this season.
Yeah, I mean, like I just kind of said before, there will be nobody who was going to get into a Lando Norris potential Drivers' World Championship than this guy right here, who will tell you when it is time to get excited, and you'll know it, you'll hear it if you're a tuner into this little show here. I am not there yet. This is really, other than Miami, I think really the first time that Lando's actually outscored and actually kind of eaten into that gap a little bit. So there's a lot, like I said before, there's a lot of success that Lando's going to have, and there's a lot of lack of success that Max is going to have. If Max's bad day is still finishing P2, that's not enough. There's permutations where it is mathematically possible. Do I think Lando's going to go and shut out the rest of the season? No. I don't think so. Is there potential for him to go on a bit of a run? Maybe. But let's see how the team looks in Monza, which is a dramatically different track. Had we done a preview, I would have said I would have expected McLaren, even pre-updates, to go well here, because since the Miami updates, where they've been good is in the tight, twisty, ironically enough, the slow corners that used to plague them is now their strength. So a track like this, I would have said, look out for them this weekend. They could be really good, and here they were. If they're really good again next weekend in a track where historically, post-2021, since we've gone to this reg package, they've struggled at, they didn't even have a low downforce rear wing last year up until this race. They had to design one and come up with it. So if they manage to pull it together in Monza and they can replicate even something close to this, then I'm going to get a lot more excited, especially if that's two different types of tracks where Lando's in front of Max. Yeah, then it's time to start looking at it and say, let's get excited. But I'm not there yet. I want to be, but I'm not there yet. As far as Pierre Gasly, go ahead.
I was just going to say it is telling though, like we were talking about before, that gap to the front. You know, for the past bunch of races, we've been saying things like, "Oh, McLaren might have the best car, or they might have the best car at some tracks." But I think the gap that they had here really goes to show, no, they really do have the best car right now, and that if they put together the setup and they have a good day, that it's not even going to be a close competition anymore.
Yeah, on their day, this is what you can now see. And this is the first time, I think, since 2022 that Red Bull have been in a position where they haven't been that dominant. And it was almost complete role reversal here today. So, but to your point, Dave, on Pierre Gasly, yeah, I mean, that was impressive. I thought he was, of the non-Big Four, I thought he was probably the most impressive driver not to be in the Big Four that had a good finish. So that's really good. And Sergio Perez, I think he gets his B- today. I think it was better. It's definitely what Red Bull need to see, want to see, need more, please. But it's a good start. Can he build on it? That's going to be the question. The history has suggested that he hasn't. If he's going to change the narrative, it's got to start next week. There's a perfectly good opportunity to build on it. To me, it's got to be P5 or better. To me, as a McLaren fan, my expectation is 2 cars in the top 5 from here on out. That's got to be the expectation to Red Bull. They got to be trying to get 2 cars in the top 5 because that's the only way that the math works for them.
Agreed. Thank you again, Dave. Our next email comes from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, firstly, I hope you guys are okay. COVID is always a bummer. Yes, it is. Lando gets his second win, and there is no doubt about it. I think he is a title contender, but I think it's too late now. Those calls from McLaren earlier in the year might have blown a real opportunity there. I still think there's a real chance for the constructors, though. I was thinking of the worst F1 cars of recent years. I think the Sauber this year has to be alongside the Williams of 2019 and the Haas of 2021. Bottas was 14 seconds off 18th place, and Joe was even worse. I kind of hope Bottas gets another chance next season because I don't want his F1 career to finish like this. And Williams have a massive issue now. What to do with Logan Sargent? Rumors are ramping up now. If the changes in the summer break, which I predicted did happen, then Williams wouldn't be in this position. I can really now see Logan being dropped now. It's looking so desperate for him, which is sad to see. And finally, Lando dominating like he did. Brilliant result for him. If Max is the next gen Michael Schumacher, then could Lando be the next Mika Hakkinen of this generation? And I think that is a fun comparison to make. That Lando could rise up to be a championship winner, the biggest competition for Max Verstappen. I would really love to see the two of them duke it out next season, starting off the year in cars of pretty much equal performance. I think it would be really fun to see. COVID's bummer. but didn't have it too bad. Thank you for wishing me well though. Pretty much just the flu. Honestly, the worst part about it is I made a really nice risotto tonight, and I couldn't taste it at all.
Oh man.
So yeah, that's the biggest bummer at this point is I can't taste any good food, and I'm a big foodie guy. So hopefully that part goes away soon. But yeah, like we were talking about, I definitely agree that Lando is a title contender, and had they come into contention earlier in the season or the season was longer, I think it could really come down to it. But I do agree with you that I think it might be a little too late now for the drivers, but the constructors definitely could go their way.
Yeah, for sure. Completely agree on all of the points there. In terms of worst cars, yeah, the Sauber is getting to Williams 2019 territory. It stopped being funny a long time ago. I think they're just kind of throwing away the rest of this season. Why are you going to put development into something that just obviously isn't there? And that may be a Bonato call to say, whatever we were doing, we're going to stop. We're going to reorganize and redo. I would also expect lots of heads to roll out of that garage. I'd expect Mattia to come in and stamp and make changes. Jonathan Wheatley's going to want to come in and make changes at the beginning of next year. So I think it's clear as day that whatever the Kick Sauber model was did not work. And so there's going to be, I think, some massive changes there. And it doesn't look like they're going to score points anytime soon. So that's just kind of a sad situation. Logan Sargent, I think, is stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point. The one thing he had going for him lately was he'd kept the car together, and that was not the case this weekend at all. That is it looked like a rookie mistake, and he's not a rookie, and I can't excuse it. I mean, you can't destroy a car like that. They send you out there. It was the first time Williams had brought, I think, a significant update package all season. It was a team that had already started out by doing it to themselves behind the eight ball with all of the reorganization, all the fact that they never even had a spare chassis, all of that. They finally rectified all of that. Then they start developing. And it looked in the first practice that even both cars had looked pretty good. I think Logan had finished FP2 in like P15, P14, which was significantly better than what he normally does. Mm-hmm. And then to go out in FP3 with all this hope. Now, granted, they may have both been DQ'd in qualifying anyway, so it may not have ultimately mattered. But to finally have some hope, to have both sets of cars with the same update package, and then to bin it like that, you just saw the heartbreak in the mechanics, and I can't really defend that. And, I like Logan. I think there's still a career to be had there. I just don't think it's going to be an F1. And if they make a change, they make a change. I don't know how you can't justify it at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree that, he's a good guy. He's a good racer, but he's not stacking up in Formula One. And it's been long enough at this point that he's had time to improve and change it, and it's just it's not going that way. And I think it would be cool if he finished out the season. It always sucks when someone gets the boot partway into a season because it just makes it look all that much worse. But that is in Williams' court now to decide how they want to handle that.
Yep.
But thank you, Rachel, for your email.
And just one little bit of stat that as Deanna was back in the airport, we were texting back and forth. She actually brought up a pretty good point. If you go back to Bahrain, the gap between Red Bull and the first McLaren, which was Lando, who finished P6 in that race, was 26 seconds.
Mm.
You flip that around, it's a 44-second gain over the course of this season. And it's in-season development that got him there. And we were putting our heads together, and we all said, when we were texting back and forth, and said, I cannot remember a season that has had that much impact from in-season development. So if nothing else, this season is going to be a testament to the upgrades and the updates. it was just kind of a baffling stat when I read it. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right, man. It's 44 seconds. So yeah, I mean, and that kind of tells you, as much as I'm trying to get anybody excited about the drivers, it's possible. It's at least possible.
It just, you know what? It takes one Max Verstappen DNF
Right.
and everything will be flipped. So
Yep.
you never know.
Yep. Exactly. And that's what will keep us watching. We've got, what is it, 9 rounds to go now, or 8 rounds to go, and they're all going to be interesting all the way to the end of the season for sure. And that's what we're here to do, and we're going to be excited as we cover all of it. All right. So we will transition into our awards. And we shall start with the rubbish. Cody, I'll let you go first, and then I have to give everybody a banking lesson.
All right. All right. My rubbish award is going to go to someone we actually just talked about. It is unfortunately going to go to Logan Sargent, who missed qualifying for squishing his car in free practice 3. Not a good look for him. I think we've probably said many times on the show that something he has done has been the last nail in the coffin for his Formula One career. And I'm going to say it again. This is probably the last nail in the coffin for his Formula One career.
It just keeps not going any better. And, like I've said before, he's a nice guy. And I feel bad, but you got to take better care of the equipment that you have under you and stop making moves that just aren't tenable. And trying to put the power down in a FP3 session that means nothing in those conditions is not the right way to make a good impression on anybody. Mm-hmm. But I digress. My rubbish goes out to Haas F1. And Haas F1 have now having to give everybody a lesson in international banking because apparently they like to send wire transfers out at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And when you do that, the recipient of said wire transfer doesn't get it, and now their cars are impounded. So if you don't know the situation that's been going on, their former sponsor, Ural Kaylee, which of course was connected to Nikita Mazepin and Nikita Mazepin's dad, that was his company, the tractors or whatever it was that he sells, was on the Haas car. So when Haas fired Nikita Mazepin, they obviously ended the sponsorship deal with Ural Kaylee early. Ural Kaylee had advanced Haas a full year's worth of sponsorship funds, and the name was not on the car for the entirety of the year. So what Ural Kaylee did was they took Haas to some sort of a Swiss court, and they ruled in favor of Ural Kaylee and told Haas, you owe them approximately $9 million. And Haas apparently has been dragging their feet and making this payment on this, truncated sponsorship that they didn't provide to Ural Kaylee. Ural Kaylee has been looking for ways to try to compel Haas to pay up. And they found it in a Dutch court that ended up sending a bailiff to the paddock on Thursday night to do an inventory. And Haas was told, you got to pay this and show proof and clear it with Ural Kaylee. Otherwise, you can't leave Holland or the Netherlands. And so what Haas did is on Friday, they more than likely have initiated a wire transfer and have told Ural Kaylee the payment is coming. Now, I've experienced this a couple times in my own business life, dealing with international banking. When you send something on a Friday, banks don't do much over the course of a weekend, so it's probably sitting somewhere in cyberspace, number one. And number two, if you're a U.S. company attempting to send a large sum to a Russian company, given the current political environment and the geopolitical situation that we're in, if there's any sort of intermediary either on the Haas side or on the Ural Kaylee side, somebody's going to look at that and go, what the heck are you doing? And I'm pretty sure that's where this is. It's probably going to all get resolved on Monday morning when all of the banks actually reopen for business. As I'm posting the episode, more than likely they're going to get the clearance. But for Haas having to give everybody a lesson in international banking, this is not what this podcast is meant to do, so you go into the rubbish bin. Yuck. Anyway, all right, so we're moving on. Enough about that. To the analysis paralysis. I'll go first with this one since I'm on a roll here, and I will just give this one to George Russell and Mercedes for attempting to do this two-stop strategy on what everybody was pretty much up and down the grid saying was going to be a one-stop race. And Mercedes left George with this. I thought at one point it was like a 23-second delta to Sergio Perez to try to make up with like 25 laps to go on a set of soft tires. That's a big ask, and he wasn't able to do it when he was already in front of Perez. So they basically cost themselves 2 positions with that call. So that's what my analysis paralysis goes to. Cody, what you got?
Yeah, I already bashed Sargent a little bit, so now I'm going to go for Williams as a whole because they've been working on this nice new floor, presumably for a while now, and all through the summer break, getting that all put together, and they bring it here, and it's too wide, so it cost them Alex Albon's position after qualifying. To me, it's just so goofy that their tools said one thing and Formula One said another thing. So now they have to go back to the drawing board and look at the tools and say, is everything calibrated right? It seems like something you'd really, really, really want to double check, triple check, make sure everything is A-okay and good to go before you get to the race, because stuff like this will happen.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I kept hearing in my head, it's an old episode of Seinfeld where they're listening to a morning radio and this traffic reporter's on there and he goes, somewhere the lanes on the highway instantly go from 4 lanes to 2, and he goes, somebody screwed up on that one. And that's what I thought of. As soon as I saw that, I went, oh boy, somebody screwed up on that one. And that's pretty much what it was. And the ironic part is, I think I actually saw sandpaper trending at one point on Twitter over the course of the weekend when all they needed to do was take a thing of sandpaper and grind it down to then come back into compliance. It's just, I feel so bad for James Fowles, who's I know trying to institute and do good things. There's just so much that you have to unpack when you do that, and that's apparently he got another lesson in what it's being like to be a team principal. So yeah, I get your point there on that one.
Yep. Moral of the story, measure twice, cut once.
Very true. All right, so we will move into some good news, and we'll talk about our dark horses of the day. Cody, I'll let you go first. What you got here?
My dark horse is going to go to Charles Leclerc because in qualifying and free practice, they didn't look like they were going to perform particularly well at all. And somehow Charles Leclerc pulls out everything he can for this car, moves up from his qualifying position onto a podium position and makes it stick, held off Oscar Piastri in a very strong McLaren for a long time during that second stint. And got some really good points out of it. So very strong performance from Leclerc.
Yeah, and I echo your comment there. I'm actually going to give it to 2 because I think both of these guys definitely punched above their weight. One was Charles Leclerc to go from P6 to P3 on a track that's difficult to overtake. He used the undercut very effectively to both jump Russell and Piastri, and then to make that stick is very, very impressive. I thought the way that he was deploying along the straight was strategic and intentional, and it worked in such a way that Piastri, every time he would get into the DRS, just couldn't finish the run going into that Tarzan corner, as it turned out, and he manages to keep a very, very fast McLaren behind him. So good on you, Charles Leclerc, for that, and Pierre Gasly for being the best of the non-Big Four, and for giving Alpine and Ollie Oaks points on debut. Mm-hmm. So those are my combination of dark horses this weekend. All right, so we will move into our driver of the day. I think there's only one candidate here. Cody, I'll let you say it, and then I'll come in after you. But what you got here?
Yep, it's going to be Lando Norris for driver of the day. I think in pretty much everyone's opinion. He made it look easy, beating Max Verstappen on his turf. And I think, if I remember correctly, Lando even dropped a little Simply Lovely during
he did.
Which just kind of dug it in just that much more. But yeah, really great performance from Lando. I think one of the best we've ever seen from him. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this to come.
at some point I will give you my theory on what I think the Simply Lovely is between the two of them. I think it is
Oh boy.
it's a reference to something that I don't want. It's not. I don't have it confirmed yet, so I'm not going to say
Some kind of
what I
inside
think it
joke.
is.
Yeah, I think
Um, but
maybe.
if that's what it is, it's two guys being two guys. But anyway, I'll leave that there. But my driver of the day is definitely Lando Norris. This is what it's supposed to look like. It kind of reminded me of the Zoolander movie where, like, all of a sudden, Magnum. And then there's Jerry Stiller going, now that's what I'm talking about, baby. There it is. That's what it looks like. This is how it's supposed to happen. This is all of the potential that we've said for so many years. If he ever just got the car, this is what he could do with it. Here it is. This is what it looks like when he's going to get into that level. Getting into the ring with Max Verstappen on his home soil and taking it to him was not anything I thought I was going to see on the bingo card. I thought they could win. But I thought it was going to be close and nip and tuck all the way. I did not have 20 seconds on this at all. And just to watch it, even on the timing, once Max was out of DRS range, gone and not even close. And the only thing that was going to take it away was either some sort of a freak mechanical failure or a safety car, and none of them happened. So, yeah, Lando Norris, driver of the day, easily for me as well. All right. Unfortunately, we don't have prediction results to go through. We will try again next week, but that's the good news. As I told Cody when he told me he had the dreaded COVID, I said we're going to have plenty of opportunity to talk F1 in the next couple of weeks. Why? Because we get to get right back on the horse and do it again. We go to Monza next week. It's the Temple of Speed. It's a holiday weekend in the U.S., so I get to fully immerse myself, and I can wake up early and then take epic naps later, and it doesn't seem to matter. So European timing be damned. But I'm going to enjoy this weekend for sure. I always love Monza. It always puts up some surprises. It's never usually, hopefully it's not a straightforward race. Hopefully it's kind of a crazy banger. I'm glad we got our straightforward race here, but let's have some fun next weekend.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. You just brightened my spirits a little bit because I totally forgot it was Labor Day next weekend. So yeah, looking forward to that 3-day weekend for sure now.
I've told like 4 people about that this weekend, and they've all said the same thing. You're like the 4th one that I've told that's been like, wow, I didn't know that was coming.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a 3-day weekend. Like it's a pleasant surprise at this point, but also very much looking forward to Monza. Monza is kind of fun and unique in that it is a pretty flat out track for Formula One. I guess about as close to an oval as they get. I guess now you got the Saudi Arabia track, which is also really high speed, but Monza is the classic, and it is also the home of the Tifosi. So
yep.
I really hope we get a good performance out of Ferrari because everyone out there will love it and drink it in, and it's great atmosphere. It looks like there with all of those diehard Ferrari fans. I hope to get to see it for myself at some point.
Yeah, Steve Matchett, who used to do the commentary when F1 was on NBC, used to say, Maranello expects, Ferrari expects, Monza expects, when referring to the Tifosi there. And that's exactly the environment. And it's going to be a packed weekend. There'll be a full Formula 3 is going to crown a champion next weekend. Formula 2 will be back into full swing after their break. So, yeah, we're going to see all of the things and have all of the stuff happening. And we will be ready. We are now ready, willing, and fully joy. We will be back doing a preview. Hopefully Wednesday evening is our tentative thought on that. And then we'll get all set up for the Monza weekend that we're going to dive on into. So Formula One is back. The summer break is now behind us. We've got the stretch to the end. It might just get really exciting. So stay with us. We will bring all of the twists and turns, the ups, the downs. That's what we're here to do. Boy, it's good to have F1 back. And so for Cody, it's been Andy. And for Deanna, who joined us from across the pond, that was also good to reconnect with her for a bit. As always, may all your laps be fast.